Hi, I'm Kathy Jones. I'm a Microsoft Certified Professional. I've been using Excel since it came out originally, and I've been training in Excel for over 20 years now.
And I'm Meg Pearson, and I am here today to learn about pivot tables.
Meg, today we're working for Leaps and Bounds Travel Agency. So we're going to be looking at a lot of data that has to do with trips people take and where they go. So I want you to look at the sheet that we have in front of us. You'll notice that there's a number of columns there that deal with bookings and the agents and the amount they've sold, things like that. That's the data we're going to be working with. You'll see the columns that we have, but let's check out how many rows we have. Do you remember the shortcut to go down to the last row in a column?
I do. I press Control and then I press the down button.
Perfect. So you'll see that we have over 10,000 rows here. So that's a lot of data.
Yeah, it is.
And let's go ahead and go back up to the top.
So I'm going to press Control and the up button.
There we are, back in cell A1. Now, we can work with this data, of course, but I really think a pivot table is going to help us summarize this data a little bit better.
Okay, and before we go any further, I have heard pivot table before, but what is a pivot table?
That's what everybody asks me. What is a pivot table? We do hear that term a lot. So a pivot table is designed primarily to group and summarize data. So it takes large amounts of data and allows us to group it by certain categories and come up with summary functions. And we call it pivots because it lets you change your mind and look at the data all sorts of different ways very quickly and easily. And really with just a couple clicks, you can simplify this data and get some really good numbers from it.
Sounds great.
Now, the first thing that we have to do in order to create a pivot table, we have to make sure that the data is going to work for that pivot table. And there's just a couple rules that we have to follow for that. For example, we're on sheet 2 right now, and this is a pretty clean data set. We just have rows and columns. We have headings in row 1. So take a look at sheet 1, and you'll notice that this data is maybe not as clean.
No, there's a lot of stuff going on here.
There is, and this will not work for a pivot table right now. We don't have any, but if you had any subtotals, those would have to be taken out. You do not want, say, a sum at the bottom of any of these columns, no sum functions, because that's what the pivot table is going to do for us.
Oh.
This particular table also has some groupings and an outline feature. So let's clear that first of all. So I'd like for you to select columns F through I. There's actually some hidden columns in there if you notice.
Oh.
So select those columns there if you would. Let's go to the Data tab on your ribbon. And these columns are grouped. That's why you see the plus sign above column I. And that plus sign just means that those are hidden in between F and I. So go ahead and expand that. Okay. It's going to show you those, but they're still grouped together. And what we want to do is clear this outline completely. So on your Data tab, pretty much the last button you're going to see says Ungroup. And there's a little menu drop down beside it. And go ahead and choose Ungroup. So now the outline feature is gone, but there are a couple of other issues in here. First of all, there's a filter applied. So we want to make sure we clear the filter, and I can tell that by looking at column B in the date sold heading. There's that little tiny picture of a funnel, and that tells me that somebody somewhere filtered this column. Now, even if I didn't see that, to be honest with you, I would probably just go clear all my filters just to be safe. So what I'd like for you to do is just click anywhere in the data in a single cell. And then on the ribbon, you're already on the Data tab. Look in the Sort and Filter group. You have the picture of the filter. Right beside it, you see the Clear button.
Yes.
And if it's lit up where you can see the red X, it means something's filtered somewhere. So we're just going to go ahead and click on Clear.
Okay.
And that makes sure that we have no filters anywhere.
Okay, and the filters are gone in column B.
That's right. So now we're seeing all of the data. The next thing we need to do is make sure that the data is consistent in formatting. We also want to make sure that the data in each column is distinct. In other words, you can't repeat the data, and it has to be consistent. If it's dates, it's got to be dates. If it's numbers, it has to be numbers. You can't mix text, numbers, dates in the same column. There's no way your pivot table is going to work. And those are just really good design techniques anyway in Excel, things to keep in mind, but we definitely want to make sure for a pivot table. You also can't have blank rows and columns. In Excel, again, that's a design technique that we should always take into consideration, but in pivot tables, that's going to throw off the pivot table.
So just to clarify, column G has started out with dates, then that means all of the data must be dates.
That's right. And they need to have clear column headings, which we see here as well. And they have to be meaningful so that when we use them, we know what we're working with.
Right.
Let's go ahead and make sure that our columns are formatted. So if you will select column A just by clicking on the heading, Column A should be number formatting. And the way
Yes.
we're going to check that is to go to the Home tab. And in the number group, you should see the word number pretty much in the middle of your ribbon. Now, let's check column B. You notice that the heading for column B says date sold, but what do you notice about the numbers?
Those aren't dates at all.
Exactly not. Those are the codes for dates.
Oh.
So what we're going to do is change where it says general to short date. And you'll notice that now they look like dates.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So let's go ahead and check column C. Column C, D, and E should all be numbers.
To save myself a step, can I click and drag to highlight C through E, or should I just do one column at a time?
In this case, you're going to need to check each column individually because if they weren't the same, it won't show you two different things in that box across the top. If one were number, one were date, you wouldn't see that. So you're going to want to check them one at a time.
That's good to know. And D is the same,
Good.
and E is also the same.
Let's go ahead and look at column F. That's the amount column. That needs to be currency. And I just use the $ right under the word general in the number column.
Cool.
And let's just format that down. All the decimal places are zeros, so we don't necessarily need to see those. So if you'll just move your mouse down the ribbon a couple buttons, you'll see the button that says zeros with the little blue arrows.
Oh, yes.
And one says increase decimal and one says decrease. Let's use the decrease decimal. Click that twice.
Great.
And then let's just verify that G and H are set to dates and I is set to numbers.
Date, and number. Got it.
So now our data is ready to be put into a pivot table. We've cleaned up the data, we've set it up, and it's formatted and ready for pivot table.
Oh, let us pivot.